Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, where we'll be talking about the importance of humanity in customer experience. And our webinar today is being sponsored by Typeform. I'm Stuart File, Vice President of Branded Content at Adweek, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I just want to take a few minutes here and make sure everybody knows the features of our webinar platform and knows what to expect from our event today. Our presentation is going to be primarily conversation between our two panelists, and that should go somewhere in the 30 to 35 minute range. After that's done, we are going to have plenty of time for audience questions. So I just want to again, if you have a question for our speakers at any point during the presentation today, just use the question tool that you should see there on your screen. It's probably underneath the video window where you're seeing me. Use that to submit your questions. And again, we're going to get to as many as we can as soon as our live presentation is over. It's not too late to invite your colleagues to come and join us today. We'd love it if they would. To make that easy for you, we sent you a final reminder email for today's webinar, probably about 15 minutes ago. Find that in your email. Should be right there at the top of your inbox. In there, you're going to find a link to the registration page. So grab that link, send it off to your colleagues. They still have lots of time to register. Come on in, join us live. If they can't make it live, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be available on demand, and we're going to send you a link to that on-demand version later this afternoon. So check your email, 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern time. You should see it pop up then. As I mentioned, our webinar today is going to be primarily conversational. There are a few slides, just obviously you see the title slide. There'll be a speaker slide and some takeaways. If you want that, just because maybe you do, we've made it available for you, and you can grab a PDF of those slides in the event resources area. You should see that tab on your screen near where you see the question tool. Lastly, I just want to remind everyone to check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars with an S. We've got this is one of 4 webinars we're doing this week. We've got a whole bunch coming up in the coming weeks, 3 or 4 every week. So see what's there. Lots of different topics, plenty on customer experience, things related to social media, you name it, privacy and issues of mobile campaign performance with the loss of mobile IDs. See what's there. Sign up for an upcoming webinar if it interests you. Check out our entire archive of on-demand webinars. That's every webinar we've done over the past 12 months. They're all available for you there. So go on in, adweek.com/webinars. So let me just take a quick moment here and introduce our speakers. From our sponsors today at Typeform, we're very happy to be joined by Karrie Sanderson, who's the Chief Brand Officer. She leads Typeform's brand strategy, advertising, PR, communications, DEI, the creative studio. She's held various brand leadership roles at lots of brands you might know, like Smartsheet, Starbucks, Coca-Cola. Those are 2 you probably recognize. She will be in conversation with our guest speaker today, Shahrouz Varshabi, who comes to us. He's the CEO and founder of Designity. He's a New York-based entrepreneur and designer with a passion for design and technology. He's currently growing the virtual design platform that he runs. That's Designity. And his mission is really to disrupt traditional advertising and staffing agencies. Again, we all know issues of design are increasingly crucial, so particularly as they relate to things like CX. So with all of that in mind, let me just take a moment here and bring Karrie and Shahrouz up on screen, and I will disappear. Karrie, Shahrouz, welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here. So I'm Karrie Sanderson, as Stuart said, Chief Brand Officer at Typeform. For those of you who are not familiar with Typeform, we are a software platform that we bring surveys and quizzes and all sorts of other ways to engage your audience, bring people in, grow your business. And I'm really happy today to have one of our strong partners, Shahrouz, here. He's the CEO and founder of Designity. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself a little bit, Shahrouz, and tell folks a little bit more about Designity and some of the things that you're doing.
Thanks, Karrie. We love Typeform. We've been using it all days and nights. It's a great product. So, as mentioned, my name is Shahrouz, founder and CEO of Designity, which is a virtual creative platform that basically gives you a team of US-based creatives led by a creative director. We've been around for about 5-6 years, and as mentioned, we are New York-based, only exclusive to the US market.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're excited to be here today, and Shahrouz and I are going to have just a conversation around brands and specifically around the importance of bringing humanity to the customer experience and how you can do that with your brand so you can get the maximum impact out of that. So just to get started, we're going to ask each other some questions and probably take, as Stuart said, about 30 minutes or so to do that, and then take your questions, anything's fair on the table. So Shahrouz, why don't we get started? I know you had some questions for me to get started.
Of course, of course. The first question that I wanted to basically discuss with you, and it's something that we hear it every day from the client, is basically what is brand? The common misconception that we hear is that it's a logo, it's just a slang, it's a font, and it could be partially true, but the reality is that there is a lot goes into it, and people have different opinions about it. According to Jeff Bezos, your brand is what others say about you when you are not in the room. I'm sure you have a different opinion. So, Karrie, what do you think brand is?
Yeah, I think it's all those things you mentioned and more, right? Brand is what people say when you're not in the room, but it's ultimately how you make them feel, right? It's a representation of every experience or interaction that they have with your company. It's beyond design. Design is important, but it moves into that experiential mode. And especially today, it starts the moment that someone searches for a solution when they have a problem, how you show up in search results, every interaction they may have with you, reviews they read about you. So it's your tone of voice, it's your content, it's your website, it's your emails, but it's a lot more than that. And it's something that in the past you used to be able to set your brand and put it out there, and people could interact with it. But it's a much different environment right now.
So is it fair to say it's a chain of interactions that customers or people can have with your brands that's basically called a brand?
Yeah, it's any kind of experience that they might have with you, whether you're there or not, or whether you're in control of it or not. You can put something out there, but word of mouth and the way you make people feel so that they talk about you, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how they felt when they interacted with your brand, the way they recommend you. That's all part of the whole picture of, it's not just people know who you are. It's they're aware of you, but they're how they feel. What's their perception? Do they have a preference for you? Will they recommend you? It's all of some of the experiences they may have with you.
Well said, well said. And how do you think is the importance of brand has changed over the time?
Yeah, for me, I think it's changed significantly because and become more important. The digital world and so much of what happens today, whether you're trying to run a business and get customers or keep customers, whether you're trying to recruit employees and keep them, so much of that happens online and digitally, which is beautiful and wonderful because it makes the world small. But it's also challenging because it's a very crowded playing field, and being able to stand out in a way that is that's impactful, that's consistent over time. Being able to do that is really important, and bringing the humanity as the topic of this to your brand is one way to do that, right? So if you show up as flat, you're not putting any emotion into the brand. There's the emotional part of the brand, and there's the functional part of the brand. And if you aren't speaking to people as humans, even though you're in a digital world, you lose that opportunity to build a strong impression for your brand. It's important. It's customers, they basically perceive what a brand believes through what we actually do. So you have to live what you put out there. Yeah. So I think for me, I have a question for you. And because you do have so many customers and clients that you work with on a regular basis with Designity, why do you think that businesses should show their human side to customers as a part of the brand experience?
Sure. Let me start with examples that we all sort of experienced. And then that's basically, when was the last time when you try to call a customer success, whether your bank or your insurance, any kind of provider, and you were hoping that you could talk to a human, but instead you are getting these messages that press this, press that, press this, press that, and you just wanted to kill yourself behind your phone, and you just want to talk to a human, right? So that's basically why it's very important to have that human side in the business, and that's obviously like a example of it. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with the humans, and even behind the most sophisticated softwares and technologies, there are humans that are doing transactions and they're doing business. And if that piece is missing, you're gonna always struggle with that. And not only in the business, not only for the clients, we also have to say that when it comes to the when it comes to the actual employees, even these days that we are all experiencing the Great Resignation, employees are leaving left and right. It's also important to have that human aspect in the business internally as well, so that you could connect with your employers in a different level than before. The work is changing every day because of the new technologies. COVID was a big hit, obviously, and at the end of the day, whether it's customer or whether it's like the internal employee, you have to always have that human interactions. If you're growing the business, it's all about the humans. You could make the first $1 million through technologies, through let's say struggling and suffering here and there. But if you wanted to grow that from $1 million to $100 million, it's all about the people, and it's all about the human interactions that you create to retain those people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, in the end, it's human to human interaction, no matter which medium you use. How do you do that? How do you work with your customers, your clients, to keep that human interaction going?
I would just print it. It's all about human, and put it behind my laptop so I could just remind myself every day, to be honest, because that's really all. Like, we all get really distracted by the problems and meetings and Slack notifications and this and that, that sometimes we really forget the most important piece of the puzzle. And the answer might be really in front of you, just you need to simplify it and use it. So you just need to remind yourself over and over. And again, if you're even selling a more sophisticated platform, there has to be some sort of connections and human interaction to it.
That's right. That's right.
So I guess, Karrie, what is the challenge with the current landscape for brands? Anything that you've been experiencing recently?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's a couple of factors. One of the first ones is, and we've all experienced this over the last couple of years, is the need to change quickly, right? The idea of change, and the fact that, many companies who are here today might not be here tomorrow. And so a brand, the idea of brands that you may have learned in a marketing class or something like that, it's really changed, that you have to adapt as the market adapts, as the consumers adapt, as your competitors change, as the technology changes. I know you're going to talk about that here a little bit, about the technology leverage that you can use for humanity. So I think that's really important, that you need to look at brand as evolving along with everything else. It's not a static thing. The other thing too is I believe that brands, it's almost like this nice leveling landscape in the digital environment, because if you're small, you have an opportunity to show up just as big as someone else in the digital environment. So you can compete even with fewer resources. So how you do that, the way you show up, the emotions you create with your brand in that noisy, big landscape is important. And if you're a big brand and a big business, how do you show up as smaller and more agile and more personal? So I think there's some challenges there, but there's also an opportunity by using all the digital tools that are available to you, but also thinking about that human connection. So to your point, how do you put yourself literally in that person's shoes, and how would I feel with this interaction, with this experience, would be really important. I think it's a positive boost for your brand if it's done well. So it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity with all this change that you can incorporate. You can incorporate the customer feedback, you can embrace the change, you can stay true to who you are, but evolve along with where your customers are telling you they want to go.
For sure, for sure. I mean, we all know that all the greatest startups normally comes of this type of challenges and bumpy environments. So it's a great time to experience all these things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess I have a question for you. You know, really, if you think about sort of different generations as they come through, it seems more and more that the consumers nowadays are really heavily invested in a variety of social causes, and they want to spend their money with companies that share similar values. How do you think brands can communicate their investments in these causes in a way that feels authentic?
Sure. So because of the situation, I mean, the reality is it becomes more and more important for companies to really define their values very clearly. And not only that, but also communicating that with the internal employees and with the whole world. It's super important to get everyone on the same page and making sure that they all understand what you're trying to do and what are the values and how you wanted to do it. Social causes comes with feelings, and it's connected to the humans that we've been talking about. And it could make basically people have a feeling about the experience that you're going to have with you. And at the end of the day, you're going to make a good feeling about them. That, let's say, for instance, a good example of it would be Warby Parkers. You buy a glass, they donate one somewhere in the world. And it's a small thing for you and me, but you have a good feeling when you walk out of that store and you feel that, okay, I purchased this $100 glass, but somebody else somewhere in the world also got a pair as well. And it basically just shows that it creates like happiness for yourself. And that's actually something that we experienced ourselves at Designity as well. We've been running a lot of different campaigns to basically for lead generations and so on. And one of the campaigns that was very successful, which was very surprising to us, was a campaign relating to emerging designers getting supports and making portfolios by working with brands. So that specific message that basically contained you're supporting emerging designers to gain experience and build their portfolio worked 10 times better any sort of campaigns that we brainstorm and we spend a lot of money to generate results from it. And the answer is simple, that people want to be part of a social cause. And whether it's small or large, at the end of the day, they feel good about it. And when there is a comparison that say, if I should go with X or Y, they might choose you because it makes them happier at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that also brings up a really interesting point about the creator economy, right? Like, we are all creators now if we participate at all in any kind of social media. And that's really important to brand, because whether or not you choose to formally, use an influencer strategy for your brand, your customers are part of your creation by interacting with them on social media, by taking their feedback in store, by embedding a form or something on your site to get feedback, whatever that may look like. You're allowing them to be a part of the creation and the evolution of your brand. And you shouldn't be afraid of that, right? You should be looking for ways that you're showing up well and things that they are very positive for, and also looking for that critical feedback on how you can evolve and what you can do better, and having those authentic interactions with them about wanting that feedback and being able to do that. I think that's really important. And it just creates this virtuous feedback loop so as things change, you're probably more likely to be able to evolve your brand ahead of whatever curve is coming. You and I have talked about that. I think that's an important piece.
For sure, for sure. Are there any examples of brands that you think have embarrassed their human side by using Typeform? that you can share with us, obviously?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, Typeform is by nature, the way that we were designed is actually to mimic that human interaction online, is a conversational type form versus actually an interaction versus all one, blank kind of digital wall. I have three really quick ones that come to mind. One of them is actually, we are a global company, so we have customers all around the world. There was a hint agency that in Mexico there was a university in Mexico that was looking to break through the noise about how they can get students to come and find out who they are and what services they provide and to choose them. And they created a really good experience that both educated prospective students on who they are and what they offered, but also gave those students a way to have that authentic digital interaction. That was a really good one, that it just showed a mix of information and engagement that gave them a brand boost, especially with a very digitally savvy group. College students are quite digitally savvy, and they can understand pretty quickly if something's authentic or not. Another one, and this is more of a B2C type environment. There's a customer called Curlmix, and they actually on their site, by using Typeform, created this like survey quiz where people could go and engage and understand, what is my hair type? What might I need? And it quickly led them through a very visually on-brand way to figure out how they can find out the right product for them and ask questions. And then on a totally different angle, on the B2B side, HubSpot is a strong partner for Typeform, and they do kind of a viral lead generation application with Typeform. So it's a conversation with marketers, and then they kind of figure out the relevant buyer personas and give HubSpot leads at the same time. So there's a lot of different examples of what we can do, but they're all unique to that brand and what they were trying to do with their business objective, but in a way that was authentic to how they wanted to show up. So they really did have to know their audience. They really did have to understand what they were there to do, and be helpful and be engaging and let that conversation happen so that it reinforced the value of the brand.
Right. And of course, Designity as well. We've been using it all over the place for applications. Yes. Like rather than having the candidates going through a boring, long application, we were able to make it very interactive with Typeforms. We have project calculator to provide an estimate of the timeline of the projects that was built through Typeform, project request form that put together a brief. I could talk about it. Like half of the company is like built on top of Typeform.
I think the point too is that it's again, you're thinking through in each stage what that audience needs and how to best serve them and figure out that application. I guess I have a question for you. As the rise right now in the idea of the virtual world, many people just perceive that as equally important or relevant to their day-to-day lives as the physical world. And there's increasing trust in things like VR, autonomous self-driving vehicles, all that kind of things. Like, how do you see brands adopting these digital environments into their experiences? What advice do you give? I know that this is something that you have researched and looked into to understand. What advice would you give around how folks on the webinar can adopt these into their digital brands?
Sure. I love that question. Up to like a year ago, 2 years ago, in my desk, I just had a cell phone, my laptop, and a screen. Today that I'm talking to you, next to all of that, I also have a VR glasses, right?
Yeah, nice.
And the reason for it is not just going there and playing game or things like that. We actually do half of our meetings in virtual reality using different apps, and especially for teams that are working remotely these days, we actually did this survey internally to see like what's the situation, what is missing actually in working remotely, and that kind of like social interaction obviously is the biggest piece. And I know you can't replace it with technology or VR, but you could get it as close as possible, like having a virtual room so that while you are sitting in a cold day in New York City, you could put a VR glasses and be at the beach with your team, and you basically just hold a brainstorming meeting over there, or chat in general, or even do some activities. It's very valuable. It's very valuable. And I know there are so many people who are against it, and they don't like the concept of digitalizations that much, but it's happening. It's happening in different forms and shapes, and it's the matter of how we're going to look at it as an opportunity. For larger companies, obviously, it's different. You could see like companies like Nike that they would acquire smaller companies that are basically active in a virtual reality environments. Like Nike recently had a huge acquisition of a platform that basically led you to buy virtual clothes. So now you buy a pair of shoes at Nike, and then you could now have a digital version of that shoes as an NFT, so that if you're going to show up into a virtual meeting with your colleague, you could have a fancy shoes on. Or if it's Friday,
it's like the gaming. Yeah, it's like the gaming universe where you buy stuff. Exactly the same thing. Very cool.
Right, because your digital appearance is becoming as important as your real one, right? And like we've been using these VR glasses for meetings for about like 6 months, and right now I'm just thinking about my appearances, that I'm feeling like I've been wearing the same thing in this VR environment for about a year. I wish I could change it. Or it becomes important. It becomes very important. So I guess when it comes to branding, or this is specific topics, and that's again something that we've been challenging ourselves. We are in the process of basically adopting our brands into the VR technologies and all that. And then the first question that you need to ask yourself is how that 2D logo or the flat logo that looks perfect in print or on websites or digital environment, how is it going to actually look like in a VR environment or digital environment? And it's a whole different concept, because it's a matter of shape, it's a matter of interactions, it's a matter of so many things that doesn't really matter in a traditional way, that makes it very, very important. So before, I mean, I have a design background myself. Like when somebody would ask me to do a logo design for them, I was always like putting it in small formats to see how it looks like if you're looking at it in 1 inch versus like 10 inch and all that. But in VR, it's a whole different environment. You need to look at it from different perspective and from different basically lens to it that you have to think about it from day one. So it's very interesting to see how things are changing and shifting very quickly, very quickly.
Yeah,
very
it sounds like it's an opportunity, right? So a bit of something to think about as an opportunity to go where the market's going, to go where consumers are going into these new digital frontiers, but also a bit of a cautionary tale to think through before you dive in, how your brand will be experienced, as we were talking about that, in a human way, even in these digital environments. That's a pretty, very interesting point. Yeah.
For sure. Do you think there is a difference of importance of brands between B2B and B2C businesses?
I mean, I think it's really the same. I worked in both B2B and B2C, and it's really humans with the whole, it's really humans on the end, building, it's not building to building marketing, right? It's buyer to buyer, if you'd like to think about it that way. So I think really if let's say if I'm in B2B and I'm moving from one company to the next, if I have that loyalty or that brand understanding, I'm going to bring my tools, my software, my experiences, whatever it is with me. Sometimes I bring my humans with me, exactly the people that I'm comfortable working with. And I think on B2C, it's a little bit more straightforward because consumers are a little bit more committed to certain products, especially if they've had positive experiences. They have a little bit better understanding what the brand represents, and they're typically the only buyer. But still, in some ways, B2B marketing, you have to talk to lots of different kinds of buyers, depending upon what you're selling, not just the same person who will use it. So, but in the end, it's still humans to humans. It's how they connect. You need to speak to them in a way that treats them as humans, that meets their needs that they're going for. Very similar to what you would do in a B2C environment. I do think that kind of the last thing is it's just how do you, if you're thinking about it, no matter what, it's how do you stand out? How are you helpful, right? How can you be helpful in education to the customer? It's what they're looking for. There's so much information out there that's digitally it's overwhelming. And then really create that emotional connection. It's really important. And surprise and delight a little bit, right? Surprise people is to create that positive emotional connection as you're building your brand, no matter if it's in person or if you're in a digital world.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes into like three things as a takeaway for today. Basically, number one is humanize your brand as much as you can. Always put yourself on the like client shoes or customer shoes and see how would you like to be treated if you're them. And then the second thing is basically staying ahead of the curve with the newest technology. That's very important rather than trying to complain about it and make excuses. Let's just see how can we leverage those technologies at the best. 10 years ago, we were all complaining about using cell phones or social medias, and most of us are using it right now, part of our daily life, right? And that's going to happen either you like it or not. So trying to adopt it and get creative and innovative, that's obviously very important. And lastly, it's basically about being able to adapt to any changes as it happens. I know that the nature of human beings doesn't like actually change. Like they normally wanted to stick to what they do and it works. And when it comes to switching the software, that's why we hear companies are offering more and more 2 weeks trial, 3 weeks trial, because they wanted to just give you something to try and eventually change your behavior. So basically embarrassing the change is also a very important factor to consider.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic takeaways. And if those core three, if you can adopt those for your brand, it's really, it would go a long way towards success. I know that's worked for me in the past. It's something we're still doing today. I know you're doing it with your clients. We see our customers and even at Typeform embracing that. And the humanizing piece, again, for me is not just how you show up and what the humans you may put into your brand, it's the humans you allow in. It's the one that you said, like, how do you allow them in, whether that's with new technology, get their feedback, and then let them be a part of that change, because brand is not a static thing. You know, it's always evolving. It's always growing. You have to embrace that change. And that's your best friend if you're running, if you're in charge of brand and that positive experience for your company.
For sure. If there is another takeaway that we should have for today is when you experience that customer success situation that I brought up earlier, calling your provider, and you want to talk to human, press 1. Press 0 from the beginning.
Just keep pressing 0 until you get there, right?
Human.
Get that automatic, right? That automatic, exactly. Wonderful. Okay, well, I think we're at the point where we wanted to open it up for questions.
Here's a real human as we go on. So again, Karrie and Shahrouz, thank you for sharing that really great conversation. And just seeing questions coming in, I am sure we're going to get lots of more questions here from the audience, just understanding, again, ways to bring humanity into your customer experience. I know I've got a bunch of questions, so I'm sure others have them as well. Before we get to these questions, I just want to take a moment. Again, I've got your takeaways up on screen. I'm going to leave them up here while we transition over into some audience questions. But to our audience, first off, today's webinar has been recorded. It's going to be available on demand. So please check your email about 3:30, 4 o'clock. You're going to get a link to the on-demand version. So once you have that link, if you have colleagues who you think would be interested in this, please share that link with them so they can get some of the knowledge that was shared today. Better yet, have them register. We will send them that link directly as soon as it's available. Also, as I mentioned, we do have the slides available. They're all of 3 slides, a title, a speaker, and a takeaway. But if you want those, you can grab them now in event resources. You should be able to find a PDF of those slides. And we know that people like to have that as sort of, I don't know, a souvenir. Just, again, a way of going back and just remembering who's been speaking and some of the things as you might want to take some notes. So let me just take the slides down here. And let's move into some of these questions. And so, Karrie, I wanted to start with you and on one of these. And, you know, we talk a little bit about like filling out a form, right? We know that so many of the marketers out there are demand gen specialists now. And so and every brand, right, has a first party data strategy. And the essence of a first party data strategy is actually getting people to tell you something about themselves as this goes on. So when you think about a lead capture form, which is, we all know whether we filled it out in pen or we're typing it in or it's auto-filled for us or whatever is going on, how do you actually bring a sense of humanity into something as seemingly sort of functional as a form to actually connect more deeply with the user?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. It's part of why Typeform exists, because we developed a way of interacting with folks that doesn't even feel like a form. It feels like a conversation. The other piece too is it's one question at a time. It's purposeful, and as people answer questions, you can have behind the scenes logic that kind of how they answer, you can take them to the next thing. So they're only answering the pieces that are relevant to them based on what they're there for. So it's more like a conversation. I think the other thing too is where you can, you do want to personalize the experience with beautiful design or video or some education along the way. The example I gave about Curl Mix, where, hey, it's a form, it's a lead gen form, but along the way they're educating, they're showing people how to do that. So I think the human piece is to treat them like a human instead of just a blank wall, a form face, if you will, just this digital wall of a form in front of them, And when you do that, you create not just better form fill rates, which is important to everyone, but also it's just a good brand experience. It's an important experience that you've taken the time to embed it in the website or whatever else you want to do that, and let them have that experience with you in a way that feels human. It builds trust, and it gives them a positive impression along the way, no matter what they're filling the form out for. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, Shahrouz, anything you want to add on that?
I think another thing is the fact that it also helps you to really differentiate from the market. We've been getting a lot of ads and messages on a daily basis, and if there is a human touch to your message, it really helps you to differentiate and stand out from the crowd. So that's another aspect to look at it.
Yeah. I think this next question that came in sort of extends this field, Shahrouz, and this was someone asking about, right, as we now see a growing number of brands using things like chatbots as that goes on, right? I mean, it's not simply VR, but it's, whether it is through Facebook Messenger or whether it is just a straight ahead chatbot, the interaction that goes on is an area, and this is someone from a large brand that has a large consumer presence, and they're really wondering about sort of humanizing the customer experience when using a bot, right? I mean, on a certain level, if you think of it as right, when we talked about pressing 0, but there is, how do you sort of translate that now into an online interaction that may be taking place via chat or something like that to ensure that someone continues through and has a human experience?
I think it's all about the timing of that interaction. And think about it this way. You walk into a store, and as soon as you are in, a salesperson comes to you and says, how can I help you? Do you need anything specific? What are you looking for? So you normally get annoyed. You're like, just leave me alone. Let me just explore around. And then if there is anything, of course, I know where to find you and how to find you. And it's the same thing with using those chatbots, right? And there's so many of them and all that. And you see that happen all the time, that you go to visit a website, it's the first time you wanted to learn something specifically, you heard about it, and as soon as you get there, something big pops up to your face that, hey, how can I help you? Or just give me your email address and this. And it's honestly very annoying. So if you ask that question or show up that chat box or that pop-up 20 seconds later, 30 seconds later, or place it strategically in different pages that you think it's not as clear, then it's fine. So it's all about the timing, because if your website is designed in a way that it doesn't help users to understand what they are trying to understand, and you have to have a chat box that they would ask questions, then there is something wrong with your website first. So I will try to do it in a way that nobody would have an answer or they're not question. And if they do, just make it seamless. Like, I'm sure if anybody has a question about something on your website, they find a way to get in touch with you. But if you wanted to have the chat box, like, it should be as strategic as possible.
And Karrie, what is your sense on that? Again, another area of technology where you're really asking for people to participate. And on a certain level, right, brands are putting them up not because they want to annoy people, right? They see, oh, this is a convenience because they're coming to my website and they don't want to navigate. So maybe I can answer a couple of questions and they just want to go through that. But it's almost at times has the opposite effect. So what do you do? I mean, do you give your chatbots more personality? Do you look at them as a front end with a true human back end for some of this? Again, when those who I think are in a much more retail or commercial environment, it's there. But of course, we also see it for the people who probably might get 50 hits on a website during the day as a way to help people navigate. So what is your sense on this?
I mean, I agree with Shahrouz on this one that the placement of it, the timing of it, where it shows up is really important. If you look at your website performance, where are people leaving without taking action? That's probably a page that maybe they have some questions that weren't answered. Where are people clicking on the FAQs? It's meant to be a helpful there. So I think if as marketers we're honest with ourselves, oftentimes we put chatbots on sites because we want something. We want to get closer to the deal. We want to get closer to the sale. Are we really doing it because we're there to give them a human experience to help them with what they're there for, which is to find information, to decide if we're the right thing for them. So if we're honest with ourselves as marketers about why we're there, I think one way to do it is thinking through, it's not always a chatbot. You can do it through a form, an educational type form. You can do it through a video. We have something called Video Ask that we offer at Typeform, which is an asynchronous way of doing video interaction. Like, hey, send me a message. I'll get back to you through this video chat, which is something that can be done not in real time, but gives people a chance to say what they want, and it's a much better experience. So I tend to agree with Shahrouz on that one. It's chatbots are we all know it's when you want to swat it away, you're on a site, and we all know when we wish there was one there right then, right? So it's getting that feedback, finding out what's working on your site, and spending time talking to real customers about what they're doing and what they find valuable.
Right. And so when we think about, I mean, the thing I was always thinking, right, because the two words I wrote down as I was thinking this through, whenever I think about customer experience, or the two words I always think about are friction and convenience, right? Because a great customer experience is not about anything other than it's more convenient for the person, right? It reduces friction. It makes things easier for people. It makes them feel good about things, right? Those are all the sort of the basis of convenience. But what you're almost saying is like, avoid technology that's going to potentially create more friction, right? I go to a website and now I suddenly have to do an extra click and close a chatbot, but I should have access to it if I want it so at the right time. Right. So that's what I'm hearing from both of you on that. Great. So question, right, as we were talking about like technologies, and this was really talking about, we talked a little bit about the metaverse. Right, and whether that is through a VR headset or whatever the metaverse ultimately looks at. So this is someone sort of talking about NFTs and the metaverse and balancing that with keeping your company socially conscious, right? When social conscious is part of a brand pillar, and NFTs, which tend to see, shall I just say, well, when things are selling surprisingly for $30 million, or it is so that, or $1 million, so one can have a small ape on your social feed, and it may not necessarily seem as if it is something that is, shall we say, socially conscious and equitable as things go on with that. So do we look for ways for NFTs to be more equitable and fit within all that? So I'm going to leave that one open to the two of you. I don't, but Karrie, what is your sense, right, as we think about experience in the metaverse and social conscience in the metaverse?
I think for this one, and I'll give a short answer, as I think Shahrouz probably has more experience with this than I do, but it's something that is new to many folks. There's definitely a leading edge of percent of people that are trying to lean in here on the NFT part of the metaverse. And you have to proceed cautiously because, like all things, you have to be authentic about it. And especially in that audience base, if you come in opportunistically, drop an NFT, and then come back out, you will be seen for exactly what that is, which is inauthentic. It will damage your brand and it will not do you any good for whatever purpose you had for doing that. So similar to any other thing, like Shahrouz was talking about how your logo may show up in VR, you have to think the whole thing through. What is my plan? How does this meet with what my customers want? And what is this going to do for us in terms of what I'm trying to achieve as a business goal? As opposed to just doing an NFT for NFT's sake. And then that piece about the inequity of it, I think there is a leveling off that's happening in that. There's some NFTs, depending upon what they are, where they are more accessible. So again, depending upon what your social equity or social consciously brand pillars are, you just have to align with that. And some have different than others. We have not explored those yet at Typeform. We've talked about it, but we haven't done it yet for those very reasons. We need to align it with our brand. Yeah,
and so Shahrouz, right, when you have emerging technologies like this, right, where everyone is trying to figure out what is the best possible experience as you do this, how do you understand that when, right, people don't always behave in the way that we expect them to behave when we have a new technology. I think it's all right. So do you go through, do you do a little bit more research? Do you sort of like just stay nimble and agile and just be willing to sort of shift things along the way? What is your general sense there?
I mean, to me, at the end of the day, businesses comes with innovation. And we've seen this all in all, right? A great example is Toys R Us. They went bankrupt because they didn't really adopt to the e-commerce. And there were a lot of other companies that they started selling toys online. And by the time that they wanted to adopt from a physical store to an online store, it was too late and it just didn't work out, right? So if you're not really on top of the technology and basically take advantage of it in early ages, it becomes more and more difficult for you. And you may actually see yourself in a position that is not going to work out. So the way that I look at like NFTs or blockchains and those things is exact same way that what we experienced back in 2000 with the internet. Like when there was a conversation around internet and having a website and doing things online and all that, there was a lot of conversation that this is a scam, like that's not going to go anywhere. Who wants to buy stuff online? And it's the same conversations that you hear today around NFTs and blockchains that, yes, you mentioned that somebody pays $30 million for a piece, but it's not just that piece, that's just the design, but there is utility assigned to that NFT that gives you certain access, right? And there are many great examples of it that has been done. For instance, Karrie V, basically that I'm sure many people know, launched a really successful like NFT collection that is basically giving you access to have interaction with him on a consultation base and also getting a ticket to a conference. So there's so many ways that you could really use NFTs and technologies to change your business. And the technology and the automation that exists behind NFTs can be really used in many different forms and shapes in the business. So it's tough to say how you're going to use it. My approach personally, and we've been actually heavily invested in NFTs and crypto and things like that in Designity. And it's tough to do so much research because there's not that much resources. So it's the best sort of figure it out by doing it and seeing what's going to work out at the end of the day for you.
Yeah. Great. Listen, I'd love to keep going on this, on these questions. Unfortunately, I think we are out of time. So for those who ask questions, if we didn't have a chance to get to your question, I always do forward the questions over to our sponsors, so there is an opportunity for an offline response. I don't want you to feel like we're ignoring you, unfortunately. We've got a clock to keep an eye on. Karrie and Shahrouz, thank you both. To our audience, I just want to share a couple quick reminders. Again, you're getting that link to the on-demand version about 3:30, 4 o'clock, so share that. Adweek.com/webinars, our webinar calendar. See what's out there. Check it out. I know we've got a couple more coming up from Typeform over the coming months, so we'll be adding those shortly. But again, see what's there. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. Check out things on demand as well. So again, let me thank our speakers today and our sponsors at Typeform. Let me thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day, and we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.